In order to tell a really good narrative story, you have to really know the people. You have to really do your research. You have to do the interviews. You have to really be thoughtful in the way that you approach these people's stories, because a lot of them are really difficult. So I think when you put together, an hour-long podcast, you really get to the truth of things, and you really can dive down deep into, what's behind these people's stories, like what motivates them, what do they believe, what do they understand about the world. So I definitely think it's the opposite of clickbait.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. You can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Here's your host, Jim Mason.
Welcome. My name is Jim Mason. I'm president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and this is Homeschool Talks, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives. And today my guests are Professor Les Sillars, who's an associate academic dean and professor of journalism at Patrick Henry College, and Emma Perley, a homeschool graduate and now college student at Patrick Henry College, pursuing a degree in political journalism. Welcome, Les and Emma.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
So why in the world am I having a podcast with a journalism professor and a journalism student?
Well, we are just starting a new project. We're not just starting, we just launched our first season of a new podcast project called Doubletake. And it is it's a narrative storytelling podcast. We tell true stories about interesting people encountering big ideas. And of course, Patrick Henry has a lot of homeschool students in it. I think it's 90% have been homeschooled, something like that. And so we thought it would be of interest to your readers to hear a little bit about the storytelling process, and also about how Emma's homeschooling background has contributed to what we're doing here in the podcast. So we're delighted to be here.
So Emma, tell us a little bit about that, your homeschooling journey and how you arrived at Patrick Henry College in political journalism.
Yeah, so I was homeschooled throughout my childhood. I lived in California for 8 years and then moved to Idaho. I remember when I was a kid, my mom had a writing group with a few other homeschool students. And from that point onward, I decided I wanted to write for a living. So then when I was looking at colleges, I found Patrick Henry, and I realized that the journalism program was really good, really solid. I talked to Dr. Sillars on the phone before arriving there. And so that was what made me decide to become a journalist student after I took his classes and realized I really liked everything that he taught and the importance of storytelling.
So how long have you been a student here at Patrick Henry College?
So I'm a senior this year.
Those of you who don't know, I am speaking in the undisclosed location in the Homeschool Legal Defense Association building, which also houses a significant portion of the administration of Patrick Henry College, because we're on the same campus. Where are you right now, Emma?
I'm in Leesburg. I live off campus in a townhouse with a few roommates.
But you still circulate through to this beautiful Patrick Henry College campus.
I do. I go to school there every day.
Cool. So as a senior in political journalism, tell us about that program and how it led to your new podcast venture.
So the political track of the journalism major has 4 political courses in it. It has American political institutions, comparative politics, international relations, and political science and research methods. The first political class I took was political science research methods, and I realized it was something that I was really interested in, and like the intricacies of politics. And being so close to DC, there's a lot of opportunities to just experience everything for yourself. Like I've been to the March for Life, Just really interesting stuff, like people that you can meet, the connections that the school has, lots of journalism alumni work in DC. So I realized that politics, I actually used to not like politics at all until I came to Patrick Henry. And then I met a lot of people who were really interested. They knew a lot about it. And so I got really interested in it as well. So that was a big part of my reason for doing political journalism. And then I took one class, American Political Institutions, from the law professor, Dr. Miriam. And it was really incredible just learning about the history of politics in America, how all of us are involved in politics in some way. And so that kind of like solidified my path through political journalism.
Les, you've been a professor here for a long time. When did you come to Patrick Henry College?
I'm just starting my 21st year. I came in 2002. So yeah, it's been a long time now.
And it's probably pretty exciting for you to develop these new programs. How did this World podcast come into being?
Well, I've been doing some radio commentaries for the World Magazine podcast. It's the World News Group. They have World Radio, and they have a daily half-hour podcast covering basic national news. And so I was doing commentaries and so on for them, and the occasional feature story. And then last year, about a year ago, I was working on a kind of a longer project. It was a special episode. It was about Free North Korea Radio, which is a program run by Christian defectors from North Korea who now broadcast via shortwave back into South Korea or back into North Korea. And that was really well received. I really had a great time doing it. It was probably one of the most fun things that I've done as a journalist that I can recall. And I said, well, maybe I can get my students involved in doing this kind of long form storytelling. I think there's just a lot of potential for long form podcast storytelling. There's, as you may know, the podcast world is exploding. There's all kinds of content out there. And there are all kinds of conservative podcasts. There's all kinds of Christian podcasts, but they tend to be a lot of interview shows. And it just seemed like there was some room for a storytelling podcast along the lines of This American Life or Radio Lab or something like that. So we said, well, let's try it. I pitched the idea to World, and they said, yeah, let's give it a shot with your students. And so we spent all last year reporting, writing, producing these shows, and they've just started coming out in July. The 6th just came out last week Friday, and we'll put out episodes 7 and 8 this coming Friday and the Friday after that. And right now we're starting on season 2. And so Emma is also working on that as well.
Emma, what's your role in producing these podcasts?
So I did a podcast on a teacher who works at Loudoun County Public Schools. And this actually ties in really well with my political journalism major. So she was involved in a lot of the political kind of implosions that happened over the last couple of years with, the mayoral race or the governor race for Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe, and her, just like experiencing and witnessing the discontent of parents and students alike in the public school system. So it was really interesting gathering together all of that political information as well as telling her story, as a teacher, what she should do when faced with all of these difficult questions in the public school. So I wrote a podcast episode for that. I did all the interviews and research and put it all together. And that was the one that actually came out last Friday. So it's called Meaningful Discussions.
How long does it take you from beginning to end? You have the idea, you have to get it approved, and then you go out and do all the work, and then you have to do all the production and post-production. How long did it take you to do one episode?
Well, we had the whole year to do it, and it took me a whole year. I think part of that was because it's, a new project. And so, we were kind of the guinea pigs, and we kind of just did everything ourselves, tried to hit the deadlines. And when we couldn't, it was just kind of a mad dash to reach the end point in the summer. So it took me about a year. I think in the spring semester, that was when it took me the most time because I had to actually put everything together in a script to make sure I had all my audio, all my interviews, and all my research together. And then the whole editing process of the script and then actually putting it all together. Because I'd never done anything like that before. I just learned how to use Audition like the year before, and I hadn't really done a huge project like that. So it took me a long time. But the payoff was really worth it. Just listening to it on Friday was really incredible. I was thinking about it. I was like, as soon as I had finished it in May, it was kind of out of sight, out of mind because I started a different internship. And then when I listened to it, I was like, wow, like this is all really worth it. And I learned so much from it.
Do you have any sense for how popular it's been in the short time it's been out?
I think it has been pretty popular. How many downloads have we reached, Dr. Sillars?
I probably shouldn't get too specific without permission from my editor at World, but they're well into it's several tens of thousands for each episode right now. Let's put it that way. It's been, I think, one of the more popular series that they've released. As you know, World Radio has a number of spin-off podcasts from their daily show, and ours is doing really well. We're thrilled with how well it's going, and with the comments that we're seeing on like the podcasts and so on. We're pretty thrilled. And Emma did a terrific job on her piece. In fact, Emma, I'll tell you now. I ran into somebody this morning at the college who said, "Be sure and tell Emma what a great job that was." So,
oh, wonderful.
Good job.
Thank you. Thanks.
Les, how involved are you in the production process?
Pretty heavily involved. So I'm kind of acting as an executive producer, and I did a couple of the episodes myself, but really I'm right with them from the beginning till the end. These are students. They're college seniors. They've never done this before, and so we have to work through the whole process, which would involve first assigning a story, and then I'm kind of helping them find their interviews and giving them some tips on direction and so on. Then they write a script, and then I go over the script, I edit it with them, and then we send it off to my editor at World, Paul Butler, who does a terrific job, and then he gets back with more changes that we make. Once we've got a script, then the students put together what's called a rough cut, which is they record the narration, then they mix up all the narration and the quotes and the music, and they kind of put it all together. And then I listen to the rough cut again, and I fix it up as best I'm able. And then we send it off to Paul, who then says, no, fix this, and this. And then I fix that up, and then we send it off to our production contractors, who do a really terrific job in putting on the final touches. They clean up the sound. They do all these things. So the students get a lot of oversight in this, but they do a terrific job with the reporting. I mean, as you know, you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, so to speak. And so if we didn't have the sharp students like Emma and the other producers doing a good job with the reporting, doing a great job with the writing and the narration, we wouldn't have much to work with. So we're quite thrilled with how season one's gone so far.
On the World News Group's website, it says that the podcast is about exploring interesting people encountering big ideas, journalism plus storytelling informed by a biblical perspective. So I guess that ties in really nicely with the Patrick Henry College educational mission. Emma, how did that tie into your educational career to date?
Well, I remember one specific instance when I was writing for the Herald, which is our student newspaper, where I covered, there was a March on Washington. I interviewed some people about it. I wrote a story, and Dr. Sillars sat me down and said, this is how you should look at things. You should look at it through a biblical perspective. You should ask yourself questions, hard questions, so that you can answer them in your writing without having to compromise on integrity and, truth telling. So I sat down and I rewrote the entire story with all that in mind, and just keeping fairness and accuracy and a biblical perspective in mind while I was writing it. And it helped me be a lot more thoughtful about my writing and the questions that I ask and what I write, and how it has impact on people who read it. So personally, it has had a huge effect on my writing, especially in journalism, because sometimes you're telling really difficult stories. And when you tell those stories, it should be coming from a place of fairness and accuracy, but also truth and a biblical worldview, so that people who read it can understand more about themselves and about the world around them.
Yeah. And if I could just add, it's what I tell students is that journalism is inherently interpretive. And this doesn't mean that it's subjective. What it means is that to interpret the world truly, to interpret it correctly, you've got to start with truth, with the scriptural truth. And so that's what we tell students, how you write depends on who you're writing for, right? So writing for World or doing a podcast for World is going to be very different than doing something for a mainstream publication. But they have to begin with this premise of you're not going to see the world truly unless you really understand how to the biblical principles that are foundational for understanding the world truly. So that's where they start.
So journalism today is perhaps under some challenge in an increasingly polarized society where telling objective stories about interesting people doing or encountering big ideas. I mean, this is just my non-journalist perspective, but perhaps journalism as a whole is kind of gravitating towards clickbait kind of journalism. It sounds to me like this project is kind of the opposite of that. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I don't think that you can really tell a story like the ones that we tell in the podcast from a clickbait point of view, because in order to tell a really good narrative story, you have to really know the people, you have to really do your research, you have to do the interviews, you have to really be thoughtful in the way that you approach these people's stories, because a lot of them are really difficult. A lot of them are full of truths and theology and philosophy. And so I think what we're trying to do is approach people as people with stories to tell that are significant in a lot of different ways. So I think when you put together, an hour-long podcast, you really get to the truth of things, and you really can dive down deep into, what's behind these people's stories, like what motivates them, what do they believe, what do they understand about the world. So I definitely think it's the opposite of clickbait. It's very much you kind of, you dive in deep and then you bring out something that's really wonderful and significant and impactful.
Yeah, and I just want to, as someone who's of course watched the industry for many years, that is absolutely true. That's the tendency of some publications, but it's also true that I think that people have a hunger to really understand the world around them, and you can see that in the way that in the different kinds of media that people are consuming now. So I mean, people will sit through a 3-hour Joe Rogan interview on his podcast, and like if you'd have said to somebody 10 years ago, a guy who does a 3-hour sit down interview with people will have one of the largest audiences in the world, like TV or radio or any other place, you'd have said, no, that's crazy. That'll never happen. There was this conventional wisdom that, people don't, attention spans are shrinking, all of these things. And some of that may be true to a certain degree, but I think there's a real hunger for stories that really engage people. They engage their imaginations. They help them see the world more clearly. And we just looked at that certainly from a perspective of a Christian college, trying to train students to make a difference in the world. We're trying to help them tell stories that matter and that tell stories that make a difference in people's lives. And you don't do that with clickbait, right? So we said, no, we're going to train them to be storytellers, train them to understand and to tell the stories that are going to help shape their audience's lives in significant ways.
How long are your typical podcasts when they're fully produced and released?
They range from about 40 minutes. I think the longest is about an hour. So we're not super consistent. Maybe we should be a little more consistent, but we're trying to just let the story dictate how long it goes.
Well, tell me, what are some of the other interesting people encountering big ideas that you've interviewed or profiled? Right.
Well, so one of the episodes that seems to have touched a lot of people. Well, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from on all of the episodes, but one was the story of Jill Stanek, who was the Chicago nurse in 1999, and people who are in the pro-life community will probably recognize the name. I think she's now with the Susan B. Anthony list. But back in 1999, she was a nurse in a Chicago hospital named Christ Hospital. And she's walking down the hall one night. She passes another nurse with a bundle. And she stops, talks to the nurse, and discovers that the bundle is actually an infant that has survived an abortion. It survived a second-term abortion. And the nurse was heading off to take it to the soiled linen room to set it down there and let it die. And she's going, we can't, I can't let this happen. And so she took the bundle, and with that infant, it was a little boy, and she held him for about 45 minutes till he passed away. And that was the moment at which she changed in a dramatic way. And so she realized that she was going to alert the world to this issue of babies who survive abortions. And it's far more common than you would think. It happens at least hundreds of times per year, but it's really hard to say because there's no good way to get records. There's all kinds of issues that go into this problem of figuring out how many babies actually survive abortions. So we tell Jill Stanik's story, right? So from that very first moment when she encountered that nurse in that hallway till she ends up going to Washington, sponsors the Born Alive Infant Protection, or she doesn't sponsor, but she's one of the inspirations for the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, which was passed in 2002. And then kind of what has happened since then with this whole issue of babies who survive abortions, and how does it happen that babies even can survive abortions? Like how does that happen? You know, we talked to a woman whose mother had tried to abort her, and what does that mean to her, and how did that shape her life? And it's just been, I think, a really powerful story that touched an awful lot of people. At least it certainly touched me. I hope that it did our listeners as well.
Emma, we hope that this podcast will reach a lot of homeschooling moms and dads, and perhaps even homeschooled students who are interested in pursuing a journalism career. What would you have to say to them?
I would say it's extremely rewarding. So at first I thought that I would go into literature at some point, after I graduated high school. I didn't even think I really wanted to go to college, but then when I found the journalism program at Patrick Henry, I thought, oh, this might be interesting. This might be a possible career option. And then after I had my first Journalism 1 class, I was convinced that this is what I'm supposed to do, that this was my calling, because I think that telling other people's stories is extremely rewarding. It's just very significant to me. Like, I've learned so much from interviewing people, talking to people that I disagree with, talking to people that I really, really do agree with, and having them help shape me to become a better person just in general. Like, I think that my active listening skills have gotten way better. I think that I've become a more understanding person, and that I really want to know other people. I really want to know about their lives, and I'm very curious about, where people have been, where they're going. And I want to be part of that story. I want to be part of a bigger story of telling other people's experiences and helping others know where they're going, and to see the world more clearly through what I can relay through journalism.
What are you working on this year, and where do you hope to land at the end of the year?
So I have a potential story. I'm actually having an interview later this afternoon with them, but there is a family whose son has a congenital insensitivity to pain. So he can't feel pain at all. And it's a very rare condition. There's less than 60 cases of this that are medically documented. And so my hope is that I can, write a podcast about his experiences, his troubles, his obstacles, and just the way that his family has helped him along and encouraged him in the Word of God. And just telling his story and how he's lived.
And one of the things that we always look for in all of our stories is to find some larger meaning in all of it, right? So, and it's not just like hot button social issues, which we do cover some, but on this one, I just really like this story because it forces us to think about how, in a really strange way, pain is a blessing. And it's really hard for us in a fallen world to grasp how and why that is. But that's certainly one of the things that we hope to talk about in this is that here's, like, we wish we could live life without pain. And yet here's a young man who's living life without physical pain, and how has that shaped him? And I think that people will find this very interesting.
Yeah, that's a fascinating topic because, I mean, pain in one sense is what keeps us safe. And we shouldn't get into too many details here. We'll let people listen, when the season 2 comes out. But yeah, that's exactly it. It's how does not just that it keeps us safe, but how does it shape our experience of living life in a fallen world? And we'll be talking to him and his parents and maybe some theologians and philosophers and just different people to try and get a good handle on what it means. Well, Les, I detect a lot of enthusiasm from you, and I've known you for a long time. I know you love your job and love working with students. Tell me what level of satisfaction does this project add to your otherwise busy work life?
Oh, yeah, this has been okay. So this has been, I've put more work into this project than I think any other project that I can put into than I can ever remember. It's also been far and away the most satisfying and the most fun. I'm like, people ask professors, what do you do all summer? And I usually tell them, sleep in, suntan, fool around, which is not true, by the way. But this summer in particular, just to get these episodes out and in a position to air, I didn't get much of a break this summer. But you know what? That's okay, because this was I'm just so pleased at the quality of the stories that we put out. The potential that it has for helping to train our students, for what it means to be storytellers, for the way that it will help people see the world more clearly. I am really jazzed about this show, and I hope that it will continue for a long time and become a significant part of what we do here at the college. So.
Well, Emma, I'm going to give you the last word. And when you finish with your last word, make sure you tell us how we can find your podcast at the World News Group.
Okay. I just want to say that I'm very grateful to have a professor like Dr. Sillars being a mentor to a lot of the journalism students at Patrick Henry. And I'm extremely impressed with all of the work that he has put into this project. It really is his baby. I think that it has really paid off a lot. So yeah, I'm really grateful to be involved. I'm really excited for another year ahead. I think the next season will be really exciting, especially because we know how to do this now, and I think it'll be really rewarding. So to find my podcast, it's called Meaningful Discussions, and you just go to the World website. I think it's wng.org, and then you go to the Doubletake podcast, and it's the first one there, Meaningful Discussions.
And of course, not to jump in, but it is available on all the podcast apps. Just search for Doubletake, one word. It's got a white background with orange DBLTKE. It's hard to miss, and it'll show right up.
And I imagine you guys have the usual thing for people to like and share and do all that stuff. What should people do to get the podcast more exposure?
You should like it.
Like, share, subscribe.
If you do enjoy the issues, please do share whatever you enjoy. There's of course share buttons and follow or subscribe buttons on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and everything else. We're really grateful if you do that. We're really grateful for anyone who wants to leave a review, good or bad. It's up to you. Just tell us what you think. Send us a letter. You can send us a note. Let's see. It's doubletake@wng.org. If you want to write a letter to the editor, we are thrilled at any feedback we get. We want to know what you think. We want to know how to do it better. We want to know what you liked and we should do more of. So thank you.
Well, thank you both for talking to me about your Doubletake podcast on World News Group. My guests today have been Professor Les Sillars of Patrick Henry College and Emma Perley, a student there, talking about their excellent new project with World News Group. And I am Jim Mason. I'm the president of Homeschool Legal Defense Association, thanking my guests. And if you'd like to find out more about what we do at Homeschool Legal Defense Association, you can find out more about us at hslda.org. If you're not a member, we'd love for you to join. And you can also donate to our cause if you'd like to. So once again, Emma and Les, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's Online Academy. When you're homeschooling a high schooler, it can be difficult to stay on top of everything they're learning. The good news is you don't have to do it all on your own. HSLDA Online Academy offers more than 40 live, interactive online courses for grades 7 through 12. And if you're an HSLDA member, you can save up to $125 per course. To view a list of course offerings, visit academy.hslda.org. That's academy.hslda.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you've enjoyed this conversation, will you do us a favor by sharing it with a friend or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts? As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode along with our other Homeschool Talks conversations at hslda.org/podcast. And if you want to be the first to know about new episodes, as well as upcoming guests and topics, you can sign up for our email list using the link in the show notes. That's all for now. We hope you enjoyed this program, and we'll see you next time.